pointing that to, right? Those who would say the Bible alone, Scripture alone. So that was an important point. And then that next point there leads right into that as well, the discussion on the role of the magisterium. Because we believe as Catholics that it is not the Bible alone. The Bible alone is not our sole rule of authority. We have the magisterium of the church, which is the teaching authority, and sacred tradition. So as if it's a three-legged stool, you need all three of those, Scripture, tradition, and the magisterium. And without all three of those, you don't have the fullness of revelation that Christ intended for us to have. So, yeah, that's really what De Verbum, which is the dogmatic constitution on divine revelation, is all about. And then number 4 is Gaudium et Spes, the pastoral constitution on the church in the modern world. And yeah, just a couple points there. That's an examination of the situation of modern man, the drama of life, and the reality of the question, do you believe? It discusses the relationship between the church and the world and the mission of the church in the world, and it focuses on problems of special urgency, including marriage and the family, culture, economic and social life and peace, which we talked about marriage there as well.
And it also talked about the culture of life and the culture of death.
Yes.
In there, which I didn't see that there, but it was an important note that is certainly facing us in the world today.
Mm-hmm. And later on, of course, we'll talk more about the culture of life in some other documents, including Pope Paul's Humanae Vitae. So just real quick, we'll go through question number 3. It usually takes a generation for the decrees of the council to be implemented authentically. Is this statement true in reference to the Second Vatican Council? Was it implemented authentically all over the world? No, of course not. There are some areas where it was implemented well, such as Poland. There are other areas where it was not. And you saw there was some rebellion in the church. There were some split off groups. There are others where it was kind of halfway implemented, much of Europe, the United States. But yeah, it was not implemented correctly or perfectly all the way across the world. So that's why we ended up with some problems that stem from that. Question number 4. 2 major social justice encyclicals were written during this time period. What are they, and provide the main points? Okay, so Pope Blessed John the 23rd issued 2 encyclicals, Mater et Magistra, which is Mother and Teacher, and Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth. And the main points, the first one was written to commemorate the 70th anniversary of Leo XIII's Rerum Novarum. It was a discussion of the individual in relation to the state, and the state cannot abrogate rights of the individual. You'll see in this one, there's a big focus against communism. And obviously the reason for that is communism was huge at the time. We were looking at the Eastern Bloc countries, we were looking at the Soviet Union, and he wanted to make a point about how that was antithetical to the Catholic Church, to Catholic teaching. And so again, discussion of economics, private ownership of goods and property good. So private ownership was important as opposed to state ownership, where it was communism, where it was owned by the state and you were allowed some of that. Economic and political rejection of communism, without mentioning it directly by name. Wealthy nations also have an obligation to help less developed nations. So, communism purports to solve the problems of wealth inequality by taking everything and then doling it out how it wishes. But obviously the problem with that is that doesn't happen. So that doesn't mean that poverty goes away. You still have to address it. It's just wealthy nations should help those that are less developed. Okay, and then we'll move through to Pacem in Terris. Peace is only achieved by following God's plan for human life, and this goes back to what we were talking about before, moral, virtuous living in imitation of Jesus Christ. It discusses the proper relationship between individuals, humanity, and the state. Every human being has a right to life and freedom, and the right to life is correlative with the right to defend life. So again, there is a call for just war in certain circumstances, for sure. And it condemns the arms race and encourages nations to settle disputes through negotiation. Question number 5, Pope Paul VI promulgated Humanae Vitae in 1968. It's one of the most misunderstood and maligned papal writings in church history. Why and what are its main points? We already discussed that a little bit. I would just refer you back to this on page 192 especially. It gives a good list, but we're talking about marriage, talking about the reasons why society at the time was saying contraception was important or necessary: overpopulation, economic conditions, those type of things. And they're all bad reasons. And again, at the end of that document, Pope Paul VI talks about what will happen. He gives his prophecy, and it's happened. So that's an excellent write-up here, and of course I recommend reading the document in its entirety as well. And then question number 6, what are the ecclesial movements? And list the names of a few of these groups. What is your impression of these groups? You obviously know some. There are some in our church right now. Their organizations usually comprised of lay members, and they seek to live out the Second Vatican Council's universal call to holiness. Many of them existed prior to Second Vatican Council, but they grew greatly. It gave an example of some of them: Opus Dei, Curcio. Acts stems from Curcio. So even the Acts movement in our parish and throughout the country is one of these ecclesial movements that we're talking about. So, all right, so that covers it for today. Any last questions, comments, or anything else? No? Okay, well, I mentioned it before class, but I hope to see you for next class. I may be on a work trip, and if so, Tiff will cover the final lesson. But I have greatly enjoyed being here with you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for following along, watching it when you're not here. And if there is any feedback, continue to think about that for how we can make it better in the future. And either Tiff will collect it next week, I will, or you can always email me and let me know. I'll send a final wrap-up email, and you can communicate with me that way if you have something else you'd like to send that way. But I have greatly enjoyed the class, so I hope I see you again either in the class. Obviously, I'll see you around the parish. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you.